Hey everybody, it's Coach Chase. Obviously, I am not in the lion's den like I usually am for these videos, but hey, let's get some work going. So we're looking at chapter 14, and chapter 14, it has a lot to do with manifest destiny and what we do as the United States, we meaning the United States, to go from having the Louisiana Purchase and what we get from Spain in 1819 with the purchase of Florida, all the way over to get to the Pacific Ocean, okay? And so there are some very difficult things that go on in this process. We want to talk about them. First question is, what's the nature of the community that gathered in Texas? A lot of you did a very good job with making sure that I knew there were three major communities. You have to make sure that you tell me these are Tejanos. Tejanos are individuals of Spanish and Mexican descent who live in what is now modern day Texas, northern Mexico, northeast Mexico. That's number one. Make sure we know who Tejanos are. Then we also want to talk about the Comanches. The Comanches are a nomadic Native American group that are sometimes called the Lords of the Plains, right? And they are raiding and going back and forth. The reason why they're raiding is because they don't really, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't have a strong agricultural base. Because they're nomads, they're hunters and gatherers, and they chase the buffalo. So they're always going place to place. And then, of course, you have the Anglos. Now, you have to call them Anglos. Americans that move to Texas, whites that move to Texas, Europeans that move to Texas are the Anglos, okay? So the Anglos are individuals who were the first families to get the major land grants. They're called impresarios. And those impresarios, like Austin and the rest, gained huge land tracts. I thought one gentleman got, 18,000 acres or something, like 18,000 square miles, and he's got everything. And then was able to divvy it up, right? So make sure we know those three groups. That's number one. After we know the three groups, let's talk about how they work together or did not work together. So the Comanches did not work well with anybody because the Tejanos were obviously very afraid of them because these people come in and they raid and take things and steal cattle and things of that nature. So the Comanches don't want them around. In fact, the Tejanos don't want them around. In fact, part of the reason why the Anglos came in was to serve as a buffer between Mexicans, Tejanos, and the Comanche, right? So they don't get along. So make sure we talk about the Comanche. Also, let's talk about the fact that the Tejanos and the Anglos overall did not come together. Now, you know there's some intermarriage, especially in places like San Antonio, but all that intermarriage was usually Tejano female, Anglo male. Those children then would become Anglo. So that shows the feeling that the Anglos felt they were superior. All right? And please make sure you use this term enclave. A place like Houston is a Anglo enclave where the Anglos only deal with themselves. Okay? They separate enclaves. So make sure you talk about all three groups. Make sure you discuss the fact that you have places like San Antonio where there is intermarriage. Make sure that when there is intermarriage, it is between the elites only. And in addition to that, a lot of you did a great job by talking about the fact of what the communities were doing before they came together. We already talked about what the Comanches were doing. We have to talk about what the Anglos are doing with slave holding and cotton trading and growing. But then the Tejanos are also not the super duper super wealthy folks. They are individuals who are running the ranches. There are vaqueros. There are a dichotomy even between that group, between the ricos and the pobres. All right, so make sure we have that set. Number two, what sparked the Texas Revolt? Man, I was a little upset about this one. Number one, what is a centrist? Everyone just copied what the book said and wrote down centrist. Okay, write down centrist, but recognize that a centrist is someone in the Mexican government who wants to have a situation where Mexico is controlled federally. What I mean by that is that the FA is in charge. So the strong federal government, the strong central government, because the people in charge. Now, the people in Texas, even the Tejanos, not just the Anglos, but even the Tejanos, were very angry about that because they had been given so much free reign and so much freedom to make their own rules. And so for the centrist government to come in and to want to change that and put like a handcuff on them, That made it very, very difficult. Now, the details you'll use for these handcuffs, there's something called the seven laws, or obviously in Spanish, siete leyes, right? And of these seven laws, the most important ones that the centrist government puts in place that really forces Tejanos, Anglos, and other Mexican states to be very angry, number one is the abolition of slavery. That enforcement of that abolition of slavery. Like, you cannot have slavery, and they begin to enforce it, not just say it. Number two, there were increased taxes. The Mexican government was broke, all right? So there's a sense of increased taxes because you got to get money back. Also, there was customs duties. Remember that the United States and Texas are not the same country at this time before the revolt, right? So white guys, Anglos, would trade with New Orleans, which belongs to the United States. That is going from country to country. There should be a tariff or a customs tax. But the Anglos were not paying that tax and not bringing that money into Mexico. But that was the reason why Mexico brought the Anglos in anyway. So there was this spark where it felt like, man, Mexico, you brought us in as Anglos to make you some money, do some things. We're doing it. Just give us our freedom. Let us do our free reign. And it did not happen. And we need to make sure we have those discussions. We have to have the discussion that the change in the government leads to these changes in the laws. And with these changes in the laws, it did not only affect the Anglos, it affected the Tejanos and other Mexican states. Texas was not the only Mexican state to revolt. In fact, several states revolted and were trying to remove themselves from Mexico. All right? So that's what we're looking for. And you can talk about economic crisis, and you can also talk about political instability. For number three, what made expansion so attractive to Americans? You need to break this one down a lot. And the first thing that I would go in the big blanket thing is Manifest Destiny. And Manifest Destiny says that God has ordained for American whites to rule the continent. That's number one. So inside of Manifest Destiny, you talk about racial and religious superiority. Racial and religious superiority. All right? Boom. Also, American nationalism. The United States has won the War of 1812. Obviously, we won the Revolution. We are negotiating with these other countries, with the British. We're buying up Spain. We're buying up land from Spain and getting Florida. We are really becoming the big dog on the block. The Monroe Doctrine is happening. So we believe in who we are as a country. We are we still have this patriotism. Now, with that patriotism, the only way that a 19th century country can become a bigger country politically is to own more land and to secure more resources. So that's nationalism. So we have what is it? Manifest Destiny, national resource, and then our nationalism, which leads to our push for natural resources. Even bigger than that is industry. All right, we're going through our industrial revolution, and we talk about the canals and the railroads and all those type of things. You need tools and resources to fuel that. So people are land hungry because they want to go get an area that has coal so we can feed the railroads. Hey, you know what? We built some really great canals on Lake Erie. We want to go to whatever next lake it is to build canals. We want to go to the next river so that mode for expansion. We're land hungry because we want to industrialize and continue industrializing. So that's 3 points already, right? Then the fourth point is real simple. Just like Mexico is broke in the 1820s and 1830s, the United States is kind of broke in the 1830s. 1837, the United States of America goes to that big giant panic, and we need to make some money. And so individuals are speculating on land in the West. And of course, Texas. When the United States annexes Texas in the 40s, or when Texas becomes independent, everybody wants to annex Texas. If you annex Texas, you can bring more people over. You can stretch it. You can push it, and even move the border west, like they ended up doing through the Mexican-American War. And then the last reason, which is really important, a lot of people talked about, simple guys. The pictures, the stories, the tales. People are giving these wonderful accounts of how nice everything is. And so people in the East Coast are going through snow and battling craziness. And then you show me this beautiful picture of California. Yeah, I think it would happen. Imagine right now, guys, that it's going to be 72 degrees on December 9th in California. And there's dudes in Boston literally freezing their nuts off, okay? So when you see that picture and you get those accounts, it becomes more attractive to you, and you chase that land. And also, if you get all the way to the Pacific, you can trade with Asia. Because that's what the Russians are starting to do with the fur trade. That's what the British are starting to do. And people are trying to go into Japan already. So you could go into Asia and you could get a lot of stuff going, all right? So that's the first thread. Make another video for other ones.